Do me a favor. Close your eyes for a moment. Now imagine you're in an open outdoor environment. You lock your gaze onto something in the distance. Let's imagine it's a crudely made, life-sized effigy of yourself cobbled together with rotting wood and unflatteringly shaped stones, which has a rude message painted on it, insinuating that you are a bad person and you smell like poo. It has to go. Your ego's stability depends on it. But you're locked in place and cannot physically reach it. Oh no! Now, imagine yourself extending your arms outward toward the effigy, and with channeled, focused strength of energy which you clearly feel flowing through you like a river being channeled in your very form, you direct that flow to converge within your hands and boom! A rounded, rocky construct emerges from the very earth itself, right in front of you, and with a following adjustment and flick of your arms, you fire it at the disgracing effigy, where it impacts and explodes into a thick cloud of earthy dust, that once dispersing, reveals the ultimate and satisfying result. The effigy now lies broken, shattered, crumbled, aghast before you, a monument of your indomitable manifested force of will. It's okay now. You need not fear society believing you are bad and smell of poo. Your ego breathes a sigh of relief. But just as you relax, the shambling effigy rises back up in a flash, and with a flick of its broken arms, summons a boulder from the earth in front of it and into the air, careening straight toward you. Without any time to process, reacting purely on instinct, you gesture both arms up high in front of you, summoning a great rock wall as a shield. The boulder shatters effortlessly against your creation. And now, with purely instinct-driven retaliation, you channel and gesture your will once more, creating an invisible tether from your hand to the wall, that you may now move it through the air as if it were near weightless. Another gesture from you follows. You fling yourself high up into the air, take aim, redirect all your will, and thrust forward your fist, propelling the wall at the effigy. The resulting impact trembles the very earth around you. The dust cloud, so much larger and thicker than before, eventually disperses, revealing what remains of this despicable insult to your character. Nothing obliterated. It has all returned to dust. Your will, manifest beyond the body, proves absolute. And you smell great, by the way, not of poo. Now let's translate that experience into 2D input and see how it fares. Right, Mr. V here, using my real voice now, not the speaker voice stuff. Gotta relax sometime, Just here, vibing, playing a bit of Divinity, Good game. Gonna use the geomancer, drop a rock on his head, So, here we go. Alright, gotta move that over here. Go down here. Click. Share what it's all about, yeah? Here we go. You ready? Ready? Alright. 3, 2, 1. Oh yeah, that's how it's done. That's how it's done, bruv. Now, let's see that in VR. Pull another ball. Need I explain how or why this is the kind of thing we need more of in VR and can only do in VR? You get it already. And if for whatever reason you're perfectly physically capable but prefer to remain hunchbacked pressing keys in front of a monitor instead, well, fair enough, we all have our parts to play, I suppose. Now I'm sure you already get what this game is about. And you get why VR needs it, and why we need to support more of this creative input innovation, and why we should praise the devs for not being quivering, petrified cowards like most of the others who keep releasing mediocre at best, unfinished trash that misses the point of VR altogether. Rumble is by no means without its flaws, mind you, some of which will be highly compromising to the long-term play experience if not addressed. I'll talk about those later, but for now there is something much more important I need to bring your attention to. Something so important, yet so habitually overlooked by us users that if it continues to go unchecked and unnoticed for experiences like this in particular, then we'll be indirectly suffocating the creative spirit from these devs and other devs who are watching. Developers who otherwise may push the boundaries to bring us joyful interactive possibilities we never thought possible before. And the thing we must address is you. Your poor attitude, your closed imagination, your lack of willingness to be challenged outside of your comfort zone, your preconceived notion of how things should always be, your refusal to accept a bit of suffering when developing a skill. Your toxic and stifling approach to playing something that arrogantly demands every experience pander to your familiar and comfortable little boundaries which you refuse to challenge. I won't lecture too much about how these attitudes came about for you, and it's fair to say that some of these attitudes are somewhat naturally inclined by our life experiences. Instead, I'll walk you through what objections are probably going to arise when first approaching such an unfamiliar concept like Rumble, show those objections for what they are, how you can deal with them, and why it's important you'll want to do this. Because in doing so, it will be a long-term win for you, a win for creative devs who actually give a damn about the art, and a win for virtual reality, all packaged into one. You are so very welcome. Here's how things will go when picking up the game. At first, you're going to be intrigued at how things work. You'll look at the tutorials, mess around a little, and want to get going ASAP. You'll practice a few poses, summon a few rocks. You'll feel like you're getting the hang of it. And then you'll try your luck fighting the tutorial bot, or, if you're particularly bold, jump into a PvP match. Here is where things will very likely begin falling apart for you. How do I jump? It was, The amount of struggle will vary per person, but there will be some struggle nonetheless. You'll fling your arms around like an idiot, struggle to remember poses in key moments, and generally embarrass yourself over and over again. The pressure of memorizing the poses, then doing them with discipline and consistency while under attack, quickly overwhelms you. You just can't do the damn pose. But you swear you're doing it right, though, just like before. The seed of self-protection and outward blame will begin to quietly sprout, directed at the game, of course, to protect your ego. Again, the game doesn't handle these inputs perfectly, and definitely has areas of blame once you get proficient at it, but as I said, we'll get to that in a while. You're openly a bit annoyed and frustrated now, but still practice some more. I'm getting frustrated. Punch! Come on! Okay, you've got it this time. Much more consistent. Good. Let's try again. What's up with those delays? Oh, your patience is fast evaporating now. You start to compare the game to others, ones which you had much more immediate, gratifying success with. You lament how they're so much better and comfortable, familiar, and just downright superior compared to this frustrating mess. Why does this pose have to be so awkward? Why should I need to do this when a button can achieve the same thing without complication? They really expect you to have to do all that? Are you kidding? Games are supposed to be fun. I'll go to a real karate class if I want to deal with this crap. This is stupid. Why make it harder to get into? Whatever, I'm doing it right. This game sucks. Further and further you slide, the more you blame the game for failing you. Oh, come on, I had my fist out there first. The straight is very inconsistent online. Subconsciously longing more and more for the comfort of the familiar to embrace you and justify your dismay. Your ego will warmly whisper to you, "It's not your fault, it's the game's fault. It's just bad, you're fine. You should succeed because you think so. Come here. Oh, you're good at pressing a button, aren't you? Yes, you are. Yes, you are." It doesn't register a lot, and I feel like it's not me because I can get it every time when I'm not in a match. And here, dear user, we reach a critical point. You can continue to be dictated by automated emotional habits which keep you frozen and safe in your comfort zone. Thus, combined en masse with many people who would do the same thing, you inadvertently push attempts at genuine innovation and creativity toward rejection and punishment. All because you don't immediately feel comfortable and gratified. Or you can make a deliberate, conscious choice to notice these impulses before you act on them and ask yourself some honest questions. Why am I still playing this? Why did I even want to play it? What's frustrating me really? Am I pissed off at the experience or at myself? Why should I expect to be given everything without challenge? If this were immediately easy, convenient, and familiar, would I value it as much? Why am I so impatient and rejecting of something so obviously new? Why am I expecting things to always be a certain way? Do I really want that? What's so repulsive to me about having to struggle to improve at something? And so on. But after all this, you may just find you don't like or resonate with the experience on a fundamental preference level, which is fine, as long as we have the ability to acknowledge that sometimes it's a you problem rather than the experience or game. Rumble is a game experience that can only exist as it is because of VR input. What it asks of your interaction is extremely different to anything you've been asked to do before in this context. So in practice, what does this really mean for you? Well, for one, it means you're going to suck. Remember, you've traditionally been conditioned all your life to expect and engage with games in completely different, almost opposing ways to what you're being asked now. Ways that have encouraged and celebrated the minimization of your needed movement more and more. We typically desire to cram our buttons as close together as possible and limit ourselves to barely a finger's or thumb's outreach for maximum efficiency. So of course you're going to struggle when asked to suddenly add your entire body into the equation. It also means that, in order to participate properly, you've got to engage a level of entire bodily discipline, finesse, effort, stamina, which you've never associated with computer games before, particularly conflicting with modern adulthood, which would, rather, lead us toward being passive, obedient, endlessly consuming slobs in daily life. All of this stuff you now face is orders of magnitude more than what you have been taught to expect all of your life. Reading it out like this on paper makes it sound far more than what it actually is in practice, though, because essentially you're just standing up and moving your limbs around with a bit more gusto than a basic walk somewhere. The modern societies we live in value convenience, safety, and instant gratification more and more above all else, to the extent we routinely neglect other vital aspects of our being, like persistence, humility, adaptation, patience, discipline, respect, just to uphold them. And being surrounded by this 24/7, these attitudes are inevitably going to rub off on you whether you like it or not. Do you want to feel like you're a person who can display traits like persistent humility, adaptation, patience, discipline, respect? I'm quite sure you do. So keep the following things in mind then. You will naturally get better at things you keep doing. Yes, you do. Are you dead? No? Then you're going to get better if you keep doing something. This is your nature. It's particularly true when you find that thing difficult and struggle with it at first. Shocking revelations here, right? Blatantly obvious to say, but seemingly easy to forget when living in an environment that celebrates and enables impulsive avoidant behavior as a virtue. Don't fall for this short-sighted, pathetic modern trend of equating a thing being uncomfortable to do at first as the same as it being bad. It just means you've some adapting to do first, which you will if you keep at it, because that is quite literally how you exist to hear me right now. We don't get to where we are through endless comfort and non-challenge after all, do we? And when you're properly paying attention and not living on autopilot, you've the natural instinct to discern clearly whether something is poorly designed or you're just unfamiliar with it. Trust yourself, just as I trust you too. Expecting something to conform to your familiar preferences only hurts you and everyone else in the long term. It's the destroyer of creativity and imagination, the birthplace of cookie-cutter homogenization, the great limiter of your potential and joy, the flourishing garden of arrogance. Sure, it's a reasonable attitude when speaking of tools with a singular, focused use, but when it comes to our creative endeavors, it is pure erosion. It's the equivalent of entering a game of chess, then announcing that the movement rules for some pieces don't fit what you want. So you demand they be immediately changed in a baby rage because we made it so we can change it. Which we can do if we really want, but we must realize these things are not only about us and our needs. Think about it. Our most beloved and enduring creative experiences are those that we allow room to take on a life of their own as they develop, of which then we participate in, not rule over. A very important distinction. Those of us who are creators hopefully understand and respect this, continuing to expand our experiences in a way that makes sense for what it wants to be, with a set of sensible internal principles that maintain some much-needed limitations to stop things going off the rails while keeping things engaging for us to participate in. It doesn't mean we shouldn't strive to make those experiences as intuitive and natural for us to engage in as we can, of course. And I will concede, occasionally convenience changes can be possible without dilution to the thing. But we must be careful, respectful, and humble as participants and creators. We are essentially playing God here, and because we know this, it's very easy to let that get to our heads, transforming us into manipulative mini-tyrants. Which leads me to my next point you must remember. Convenient, easy, familiar are not things you actually value from your experiences. No, you don't. No, you don't. This is true for your endgame goals too. Let me ask you, why do all our stories need an arc, a process, and not just get immediately to the end result, if that's all we supposedly care about? The same for music. Why do we bother having a process or flow to it? Our sports. Why do they last as long as they do? Have the rules they have? Here's an adjective for you. Satisfied. Why do we feel satisfied with something? Today's misguided users would probably answer with getting the thing you want, or in the case of games, more content, more stuff to do. No, this is naive and not true of how we value things. None of that is satisfying to you. What satisfies us, what is interesting and engaging for us as humans, are the challenges of the process toward completing the goal. Think about it. Your fondest and most valued experiences in memory are only that in proportion to how much challenge you face during them. That's why you value them. Our satisfaction comes because of what stood in our way, and the story of the actions we took to not be stopped by them. Have a story without drama or adversity that threatens us in some way? We're not interested. We design purposeful restrictions and limitation into our interactive experiences and sports because, without them, we're not interested. Now you might be saying to yourself, well, duh, tell me something I don't know, Mr. VR Voice. But do you know it really? Have you observed your dismissive attitude toward recent media which you rejected quickly because it didn't adhere to the set norms you've become accustomed to? Was it really the game that had poorly designed mechanics that made you dismiss it? Or was it your unwillingness to accept something you think isn't the trendy right way, like the other good things you're comfortable with? Are you really aware of how you're behaving in those moments? Are you even making those choices, or is it some programmed reaction possessing you instead? If you keep demanding and getting what you think you want, you'll never be satisfied. What you want is nearly always the habit to re-experience a nice feeling you had before, to which end you'll then only seek the things you've already identified can offer that. Those safe, comfortable, familiar things over and over again. But what's this? The feeling isn't quite the same. Not as nice as before. I guess we just need more of it then? Yeah, more. More remakes, more of the same. Only the thing I already know can make me feel good. Anything new or different is not safe and we must reject it. And so, creativity, innovation, imagination, and progress withered away to thunderous applause, sponsored by all your favorite corporate monopolies who profit from keeping you in this cycle. You have no idea what you actually want, and we rarely ever do. What we value is the surprise of finding out how engaging something can be when we were never expecting it. Think back now. That thing you're nostalgic about, which you crave, chase, and desire, and demand. It's not the thing itself that you're after. It's the feeling you got from it. How did you get that feeling? Because it caught you completely by surprise. You never expected or experienced something quite like it until that moment. Your narrow-minded ideas were not pandered to. The idea was allowed to be what it wanted to be, and you had the best experience as a result. So again, just imagine if we approached a chess game and refused to accept the movement rules of each piece. Why shouldn't this piece be able to move more? Or why can't we move 2 pieces at a time? This isn't fun. Why can't we just do whatever we want? You intuitively get why this would be silly, right? So why are we more than happy to have this attitude so easily with everything else? Do you notice the contradiction here? But I'll admit, sometimes we can find genuine value or joy in the immediate gratification and ease of something. In particular moments, it's exactly what we need. And there is always a place for such things to contrast against everything else. But you need remember that these are the junk food equivalent of your experiences. Cheap, addictive, manipulative, highly damaging for us and others in the mid to long term if consumed even semi-regularly. Keep yourself aware of these and other pitfall habits which I haven't mentioned for the sake of brevity, and they will take care of themselves at your own personal pace. There are significant benefits to paying attention to these things which extend beyond you and affect everything else. Through more attentive, honest action, you will teach yourself to realize that some struggle is okay, even beneficial and necessary, that you may have so much more joy and satisfaction as a result. This will then subsequently leak into all parts of your life, allowing you to have a more positive, confident, and humble attitude toward other challenges you face, and trust me, you will be facing them. For your beloved media in whatever form, this healthy attitude you foster will stop you retreating to and demanding the same old rehashed familiar experiences over and over again, which, in the end, is always an ever-diminishing feeling that is never enough. Then, with our combined actions and the atmosphere that begins to emerge because of it, we will naturally incline and encourage our artists toward attempting originality, rather than rehashing and pandering. Our artists and creators will be more willing to experiment, be less fearful, and take more creative risks. We'll once more start seeing new original worlds and creations, new innovations, joyful fresh surprises we could have never imagined, which will inspire us again. And more importantly, shall inspire future generations. It's a win for everyone. How pitiful and sad it would be for our children if they had nothing else except the same old, endlessly reanimated corpses of corporate-dominated franchise media sequels from our childhoods and before, because we refused anything but our nostalgia pandering while curled up in our selfish, infantile safety bubbles and rejecting the chance to let new ideas blossom in society. We damn everyone with this behavior, even those not born yet. Like it or not, the fact is, even if you agree wholeheartedly with what I say or not, you are never a powerless victim of these circumstances. I'll say it again, you are not a victim. No matter how much you claim or are convinced you are, it's just another excuse, another safety bubble to vindicate yourself from any responsibility. We create the circumstances of our environment, with your choices of do or do not. These things only respond to you, as it always is and has been. But will you stay aware, or will you keep buying into the lie that you have no influence or ability, and continue sleep-consuming us all into a creative dystopia? Sponsored and enabled by all your favorite big corporations as always. My, oh my, look at that. I've done it again, haven't I? Gone off on a tangent and given you yet another earful of preachy, slightly condescending philosophy, yet I still haven't told you much about this nice game for virtual reality, which prompted it all. Okay, here we go. Rumble is the kind of innovation risk you and VR need. It takes an input only VR can do and leverages it into its own game, and it does well for a first try. Much like the professionally written creative excerpt at the beginning of this video written by yours truly. This game's premise is kind of the beginnings of a fantasy dream come true, and it's novel, fresh, and nuanced enough that it can get away with being a light-on-content PvP-focused affair. It is a pity there is no single-player content to speak of, and being PvP only is a valid reason for some of you to dismiss it because of that. The game is in official early access, which leaves the door open to possibilities, but I guess that all depends on sales and stuff. I think the execution of the concept alone justifies a supporting purchase, however. Even if you wouldn't play that much, but still wish to play your vital part in advancing VR innovation and rewarding these devs who have taken a risk in creating a game that is willing to put as much on the player's shoulders as it does, with a very competent first execution. So let's talk about these poses and input. The poses you need to perform are fairly well considered, with combo potential in mind that matches naturally with our body mechanics, kind of like martial arts. Despite the game overall being sparse, I feel the input itself is intrinsically engaging enough to get by, with a decent amount of variation and possibilities in its own right. Even fighting against the training bot or creating combinations of interactions between the structures is far more engaging than what most other VR games over the years and even presently have to offer. Seriously, it's good. As with anything that has a comparatively strict asking requirement of ability as a base, when you start to get the hang of things, and you're willing to persist, and as a result see your intent start to manifest with more regularity in practice, the satisfaction is immense on a very profound level. It also serves as a taster, a demonstration of just a fraction of the ginormous unrealized potential for VR. It's so exciting to imagine how this concept, in combination with other unique VR-only interactions, with appropriate polish and devs who give a damn, could form the most incredible and compelling game experiences we have ever had. The game itself is not especially janky in its current state, which is another rare treat in this climate, sad to say. And yeah, that's basically the game itself. If it sounds interesting, or if you want to support VR, go, buy. But now, all those aside, let's get to those flaws which I mentioned prior, and I feel could massively compromise the long-term reputation of the game if not addressed. Bear in mind, these are my own subjective observations, and because I say them publicly in a pseudo-leadership role context while sitting alone on the floor of my living room, talking into a microphone, they are thus unquestionably right. Rumble is a PvP fighting game first and foremost, so competitive integrity is paramount to maintain. Brushing aside some of the stun-locking cheese players can exploit, which is present for many fighting games and usually get addressed eventually, the game's networking presently relies on pure peer-to-peer networking. Host advantage is a very real thing at the higher end of play, where users are more competent and skilled enough to perform most of the moves they intend, when they intend. If you are not the host, there is a very real delay in your inputs being registered, and sometimes not registering at all. It is super devastating and demoralizing when this happens to you because, unlike a binary button press, this delay in physical input adds ambiguity to your confidence of performing the correct pose. Not to mention that posing is a far more deliberate, intensive method of input, so compromising the player's effort through no fault of their own is deeply frustrating. The host, of course, suffers none of this, and they can simply do things instantly and respond better to what's happening. The better the player who is host and the higher the ping between players, the more massive this advantage becomes, basically. The client is playing the game in slow motion, depending on the ping, with more inconsistent behavior, while the host does not. As I understand while recording this, there is no ping normalization or ways which are implemented to balance things, but there needs to be, when possible, if the game is to maintain its integrity. As a silver lining, however, the amount of bitter frustration this can produce in you through one session of higher-level play can create enough salt for you to season your meals with, lasting up to a month. Nature is delicious. My second concern is the current endgame behavior of player skill, which is this.
The host and Street Kid will not be the host. And you can always know that you're the host if you're on this side of the map. So you can just, make up your strategy before the game even starts. And do things like that.
Now, this is only my opinion, but I don't think this is interesting to watch or play against. And I believe many players making their way through the game to then find this is the current endgame state of play will not want to participate or enthusiastically share the game with others. Maybe I'm only speaking for myself, but ability spam like this with no limitations is not an interesting or aspirational level to attain. It's just deeply off-putting due to how one-note it is. It would be like if Dark Souls had no stamina bar to consider and you could endlessly swing your weapon without restriction or consideration. Not only would that change the entire perception of the game, but, again, it's not interesting or engaging. particularly for the long-term perceived reputation of the game. I would bet that if prospective buyers start to learn that this was the endgame that was waiting for them, with no other playstyle on offer, I don't think they'll be participating somehow. Not to discredit the effort and skill involved in this playstyle, there is much merit in being able to perform so consistently well, and this player is a very good player, if not the best at the moment. But I think you get my point. There is so much more that can be aspired to than this. I think experimenting with a Dark Souls-style stamina bar that limits this spam possibility to short bursts only, which then come with consequences if recklessly done, would enable much more interesting modes of play to emerge naturally, or something like that anyway. Whatever the devs do, I don't foresee this endgame performance as healthy for the long term. My last main concern is the strictness of the pose requirements, or rather the devs' lack of certainty of how strict the poses should be. I must stress again that this is my own correct opinion. The devs may have completely opposite ideas or intent for the game compared to how I see things. Now, the fake accessibility online virtue actors who behave as such only to follow the trend for social brownie points will not like what I have to say here. Oh well. But yeah, the game has been yo-yoing in recent patches on the pose leniency, and it remains a hot topic on how strict it should be amongst the player base. It's murky waters here because of the aforementioned ambiguity with the input compared to a button and how much should be reasonably expected of a player. Too lenient, and the game risks becoming too forgiving, and there is a higher risk of accidental move activation between poses. But it can be conceded it would make things more accessible to those who would struggle more for whatever reason. Too strict, and the opposing issues players would face are obvious. But what is too strict in this context? How precise can we reasonably expect a player to have to be with their bodies? Should it mimic close to real-life precision as we would expect when playing a sport? We are certainly capable of it, but is it reasonable to expect that of someone in VR? Is a balance between them possible without too great a sacrifice of potential? For a highly physically focused input method that body condition can greatly impact the effect of, how much accessibility can we and should we realistically expect? For competitive contexts, options and accessibility to allow opportunity for as many as possible is great, to a point. With these things, there is a bigger picture to consider that have implications which extend beyond the activity we are focused on or talking about. Attitudes and impressions from a moment carry forward into every facet of our life and affect many other choices we make. As a collective, we can thoughtlessly take our concerns too far into pathological territory, to the point we can begin to ask the question of what we are inherently holding back as a result of doing this, which I feel we are starting to do with such a cult-like social focus on accessibility these days, because it risks crippling our potentials in many ways, pun intended, for the sake of vapid, egotistical social posturing. You're probably not surprised to hear that I'm in the camp of having realistic expectations for limitations and possibilities of choosing to engage in a very physically focused activity, which benefits from being healthy and able. Let me ask you this. Would it be reasonable of me if I decided to join a football team with a bad leg which limited my ability to perform, to then expect both my team and my opponents to limit themselves and adjust the rules of play just to pander to my weakness or limitation? Yes? No? Or perhaps should I be given artificial assistance, which removes a requirement for skill that otherwise would have to be trained and refined for, like everyone else had to? Yes? No? I don't think so. It would be self-centered, spoilt, and inconsiderate of me to demand the world and everyone to hold themselves back to cater to me. It would be better, instead, that I had some humility and a more realistic perspective, that I recognize the reality of my current limits, but I would always attempt to push them as far as I can within reason. And instead, it would be better if I supported and cheered on those who were perfectly able and encouraged them to reach heights of ability and accomplishment in my stead where I no longer can, and be proud of them for that. Not bitter because I've some inflated sense of entitlement just for existing. Hopefully you can get where I'm coming from with my example there, and you can see where my intentions lie. What will the devs do next with the pose strictness, though? Who knows? Maybe they are getting scared of losing all the sales if they don't make it too lenient? Maybe they're flirting with the mainstream appeal goblin in some dank alleyway. Or has the incessant, insufferable, ill-considered parroting of typical social posturing, text forum-dwelling, infant-minded collective whining started to influence them? Maybe. Well, that script took an unexpected turn, eh? Text forum meme culture dwellers. Did I just anger you with what I said? Are you seething at my heathenous words which don't adhere to the party line you all follow? But, you don't follow collective narrative. You hate this particular marginalized group of people who I have decided to condescendingly speak for. You... Shh. Hush now, little one. Focus your energy. And first, go and buy Rumble. If you've any interest, of course. Reward innovation for virtual reality that we may see more of it, and then train yourself with discipline and excellence in game. Finally, find me. Come and kick my ass in one-on-one rock-slinging to punish me for what I've said. Do it. I'll be smiling every single moment as you do. Thank you to those who choose to support me and help to keep my channel going. If you would like to support me, you can find links in the usual places. I ask for no more than £1 per creation. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again.